Hey everyone, and welcome to another Game Explained discussion. I'm your host Ash Paulson, and today I'm joined by special guests Nintendaan and RogersBase to look back on Final Fantasy XV and reflect on what it gets right, how it could be improved, and how we personally feel about the game. Naturally, this discussion will be full of spoilers and we'll be openly chatting about elements like the last chapter, final boss, and ending. So if you're trying to avoid FF15 spoilers, back out now. This is your final warning. And with that said, let's get started. Alright guys, so all three of us, I think at this point, have spent dozens and dozens of hours with this game, just exploring everything it has to offer, uncovering this, really interesting story, and just generally kind of soaking up everything this latest Final Fantasy is all about. So I thought it'd be a good idea to kind of get us all together and really reflect on the game and get your thoughts. So I know we just were talking about, right before we started, I actually ended the game at about 70 hours, 75 hours. I did so much optional stuff before going on to the second half of the game. But it sounds like you guys actually finished it quite a bit faster than I did, right?
Yeah, so for context, I actually went for the story first. And I think I told you when I was going for the game back then that I was planning to do that, because solely for the sake of avoiding spoilers as much as I could.
Right.
After that, though, I used Umbra to move back to a bunch of places, so the dock that you get in the latter half of the game, to do more side stuff that I want to do, and that's how I got a lot of additional time in, and I ended at about like 35 to 40 hours.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually really similar to me too, because the first pass way through, when I first unlocked Umbra, I didn't realize that you could go back in time and actually experience up and then transfer that to the future. The way I read it when that first happened was you can go back to previous chapters, but you don't keep any of that. You just go back to the past. So I was afraid to use Umbra to go back in the past to do more side quests, and so I just blaze through the main story of the game. And on top of that too, I was kind of on a time limit because I knew that I was going to come back to Chicago for the holidays and I wouldn't have my PS4 with me, so I really wanted to get through the main game first. And I think my end game clock was at 32 hours and 26 minutes, if I'm looking at this photo correctly. And yeah, I had an absolute blast with it. I mean, we're going to talk about in detail all the things we liked about it and didn't like, but yeah, I've been going back, finishing a lot of side quests. I've been trying to complete the one secret dungeon that everybody's talking about that's really, really cool and different and unique for the franchise. I'm trying against that Adamantoise giant boss, the huge island turtle.
So
I have
cool.
not been able to defeat that yet. But yeah, I'm having an absolute blast with the game. And I think my current game clock now is at around 55 to 60. So I've played a lot.
Well, yeah, I think my game clock was at 77, and I know I left the game on for 10 hours somewhere in the interim, so I'm going to say it was somewhere more around 65 hours. But I think I just got so hooked on the battle system and going out on hunts and just taking on various random side quests and really just exploring the world, exploring the open world portion, that I just got sidetracked. I kept wanting to move on, but then some other cool thing would get my attention, and I'd just go over there and not actually go to the next story beat. So it's interesting. Final Fantasy XV really almost is two separate games in one. I mean, and I think a lot of the pre-release leaks and speculation kind of hinted at that, but you really do have the first half of the game, which takes place on the continent of Lucis, which is this open world, very gameplay-focused, relatively story-light chapter or part of the game. And then the game shifts over to the other continent, where the Gralia continent, where the Empire is. And really, from there, it's on rails, literally, because you're on a train for most of it, and kind of it kind of siphons you straight, or kind of just pushes you straight to the end of the game, which is an interesting dichotomy, I think, because it really results in two very different gameplay experiences. But let's talk about the gameplay first, because at the very forefront of everything, it's still a video game. So Final Fantasy has always changed up its battle system from game to game, of course, but never quite like this, right? With this game, we got something a little more action-oriented, something almost that looks like it's out of a Kingdom Hearts game, but not quite that action-oriented. So how did you guys feel about the battle system in general and moving around the world, and how did you like interacting with the game?
So moving around the world was awesome. I gotta say, that's the first thing I want to see. Moving around the world, getting the Chocobo, and then once you can unlock the Chocobo, I think it's after Chapter 3, and then also the Regalia, once you unlock some of the later on features with that, I really enjoyed that. And I know that's something that a lot of people had an issue with, was even though it was supposed to be a road trip, they feel like they spent a lot of time just sitting in the car as it was auto-driving to the next location. But I don't know about you guys, did you spend the majority of the time actually controlling the car yourself, or did you do it automatically?
I did try to control the car myself. I still felt it was really on rails.
Yeah, I was actually, it's funny, me going in there, I was so sure I was going to want to drive myself the whole time, because I love driving in real life, but when I got in there and realized that the driving mechanics, you might as well just be on rails anyway, I just kind of sat back and let the game do it for me, so I could enjoy the music or the sights, moving the camera, things like that.
Because something I found myself doing a lot of time about halfway through the game is I would be on a side quest and I would like manually drive, and then I would see something off in the distance, like I'd see like a little glowing treasure piece, or I'd see something coming up on my map that I haven't like gone to already, and then I would find myself parking over to the other side, happy that I didn't have it on automatic, otherwise I would have missed that thing if I was like, training in Pokemon or doing something else while the car was automatically running.
Right.
And then I would like pull over and do the side quest. So I found that aspect of it to actually be really enjoyable.
Yeah, me too. And what's actually really cool is even if you're on automatic, and I found this out, I guess the easy way, because I was just automatically driving from point to point. Ignis, if you actually have a side quest, not even active, but just on your list, Ignis will sometimes remind you, like, oh, there's that truck that got derailed that has the food shipment for that guy in Listalum. Maybe we should go check that out since we're over here. And I thought that was a really cool feature. So even if you're not driving manually, Ignis will at least sometimes tell you, hey, we're already in the area, do it now so you don't have to come back later. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Prompto would do that too.
Did he?
With the photo ops, yeah. I noticed that a lot of the times. I'd be driving and Prompto would be like, hey, there's a cool location up ahead. You want me to pull over and take a picture? And I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? That's free experience. So
right.
I'd always pull over and get a picture.
That actually became kind of a running gag. Sorry, Don, really quick. That became kind of a running joke between my wife and I, because that ended up kind of annoying me. Like, Prompto's, he always wanted to take photographs. I know he's a photographer. I know it's what he does, but sometimes I'd just be like, oh God, Prompto again? I mean, yes, I want the free experience, but can we just get on with it, please? But sorry, Don, you were saying?
Yeah, so as far as traversing is concerned, initially I thought that I would want to drive the entirety through the game as long as I could. But as I toyed around with it, I came to the conclusion that it was sort of pointless, because it feels you're kind of on rails anyway, so I just let Ignis do all the driving, and I just enjoying the world on its own. And like you said, he gives you pointers anyway, things that I would likely have missed otherwise, so why not let him carry me through the game while I just take in the world, and as if it is important, he will tell me anyway. So
right.
Yeah, from that point of view, I didn't really think about traversing through the game. I did really enjoy, you touched on it briefly, Roger, but I really loved riding on a chocobo. The moment when you lose the regalia, I just try to boost every single ability, or use every single ability that the chocobo had.
Yeah.
It is so much fun, so goofy and so hilarious all at once.
No, especially once you're at level 7 or 8 or whatever, and you could just sprint across the field with them.
Yeah, I spent so much time riding chocobos, and not just because it's convenient and it's fast, but also, to me, I thought that was the best way to take in the game's beauty. It's great from when you're riding the car, and that's great, but the game really shines when you're either on foot or on a chocobo and riding around, the Duskai region or the Clane region. I've seen a lot of, people talking online about how, 15 doesn't look as good as it should or as well as it could have, but I almost feel like they're playing different games, because when I look at this game, now, granted, I am playing on a PS4 Pro, so that could be why, but I am floored by how gorgeous this game is. And just exploring the main continent, the Lucis continent, I'm not really into open world games traditionally. I've never been able to get into Skyrim, games like that. But I found exploring this world to be a complete pleasure, just because it's so beautiful. And I feel like the tagline, a fantasy based on reality, I feel like they really bore that out in the game. This looks kind of like the real world,
sure,
but it has a fantasy twist to it, and it's just such a beautiful game to behold.
The thing I do want to mention concerning the open world, and this is something that I feel is sort of overlooked, and this is kind of a problem of mine. It gives you the sense of an open world. I feel that I've hit the borders of that open world way more often than I should have.
Sure. Yeah, and that's true. I agree. Although to me, I actually find that to be a good thing.
No, I'm not saying that. It's necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that being guided more for the experience is actually something that I honestly enjoy a bit more. Especially with games like Xenoblade Chronicles X, for example.
Right.
I was just going to bring up Xenoblade Chronicles X, because I feel like the borders in this are a lot clearer than the borders in Xenoblade, due to the fact that in Xenoblade, you can fly around with your Skell, and you're sort of going past mountains, where in this, for a very long period of time, until the end of the game, when you get the Regalia Type F, until that portion of the game, you can't really jump as Noctis. Like, this is one of the first games where, like, jumps feel kind of realistic, because you can't jump over certain rocks that are in your way. You'll need to, like, get on the back of a chocobo and sort of float over there, or try to find, like, higher ground to go over to your locations. And so yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Don, because I feel like those borders do become really noticeable when you'll get to a certain area that maybe you weren't supposed to get to quite yet, just because you can't jump over, like, those rocks or those little border lines that sort of go down the highway. There's been a lot of moments where I feel like I should just be able to jump off this highway onto this tall rock. It's like, nope, you can't. You're just a little too short with your jumps.
Yeah, something that's actually one of my gripes with the game is just the maps in general. I found the maps to not be very useful or communicative at all. Like, the maps don't do a good job at all of kind of differentiating where you can go from where you can't. At least in the first part of the game, before you have the Type F. Like if you study the map, where you can't go literally looks exactly the same as where you can. So it makes it very difficult to get a read on exactly where you can explore and where you can't, especially in dungeons. I didn't find the maps to be all that useful in dungeons either, and that's something that I found to be a persistent issue throughout the game, and it just kind of gave me the sense that, as great a job as Square did with this game, and I think they did, you can tell that they're still a little new to making open world type games.
Yeah, and the two dungeons in particular that I think it really, like, stuck out, like what you're talking about, are one, the mines, where you get one of those king's items where you're going down the elevator, and it's like, wait a minute, what level am I supposed to be on? And the second one was, I don't remember the name of it exactly, but it's near, like, the very first location in the game, where you go, it's like the underwater sewers.
Yeah, I know who you're,
Oh my god, I was looking forever to try to find those headlights for Cindy, and I could not find them, even though there was a little blue locator on my map saying, go right here, this is the location, and I'm standing right underneath it, like, in the water, thinking, where am I supposed to go? So then I thought, okay, I gotta beat the mini-boss in the dungeon, the giant, like, snake, the snake harpy thing. Okay, so I beat it, and I'm like, wait, it's still not showing up. Then I climbed up the ladder, and I'm like, alright, wait, where is the headlight?
I had that blue pointer actually glitch on me at one point.
Oh no.
Where I was at the correct spot where I should be, but I couldn't pick up the thing that I should supposed to pick up. I should have restarted the game, because I spent a half hour thinking, so am I at the correct location? I'm doing this correctly, right? I'm absolutely sure that I'm doing this correctly, right? It turns out the game just glitched on me.
God, I'm feeling so vindicated hearing this, because when I was playing that, it's the Crestholm Channels, I think it's what it's called.
That's it.
Yeah. And when I was playing, I'm like, God, am I just like, is this newbie hour or something? Because I was streaming at the time. I'm like, whatever, I got a few free hours, I'll stream this dungeon because I want to show off how great the dungeons are in this game, which I'll come to later. Right. And I'm like, okay, cool, it's like 11 p.m., I'll do a late night stream for a small audience. Like, almost 4 in the morning, I emerged from that awful place, and I'm just like, I was running in loops, in circles for so long, trying to figure out the maps and the different floors, and those headlights were so hard to find. So I'm feeling very vindicated right now, hearing you guys have the same experience.
Oh no, absolutely. I think that the maps in the dungeons should have been thought through just a tiny bit better.
Yeah. Now, that said, the maps may not be so great, but the dungeons themselves, I'm telling you guys right now, I think the dungeons in this game could be best in series material. Like, really, truly fantastic.
Easily.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And not even just best in series. These are some of the best dungeons I have ever explored in a game, period. I mean, I love how baked into the world they feel. They don't just feel like you're going from location A to location B through a loading zone. They feel like they're actually baked into the landscape of the world, and that they really feel like they belong there. And one dungeon that really stands out to me in that regard is it's the Death Mountain looking mountain. I can't remember the name of the mountain.
Oh, I just played that before.
You did? Okay.
With the lava that's, like, coming down the path, and then you have to try to, like, climb up the mountain to not hit the dead ends, and then you hit the volcano. Oh,
it's so good. And the terrain is so
good.
Like, there's so much terrain variation, and it feels like you're actually hiking up a mountain. And I'm like, you guys, but you can also turn the camera around and look back on where you've been, and look back at the entire continent when you're at the top, and I'm like, this is the coolest dungeon.
When you get to the moment on the top of that dungeon where you hit the campsite, and then the little dialogue tree comes up, and then Prompto's like, "Are we really gonna camp here?" And he's like, "Well, do you have a better idea, Prompto? Like, where do you want to go?"
Yeah.
And then you just start camping, and the campsite sequence for that is just so gorgeous, because then it's nighttime, the lighting is beautiful, you see the campfire on the side of the mountain, you just get this great view of the vista. That dungeon is seriously incredible, and all the little fights where you fight like the dragon with the little nest with the little eggs.
Yes,
it's beautiful. And the one thing about that I want to mention, because you're talking about like how the dungeons are sort of baked into the environment, this is absolutely what I want from Breath of the Wild next year.
Yes,
I think they tried to do this a little bit in Skyward Sword, where like you would go to a location and the dungeon would be part of like that location that you're exploring, but I don't think they quite pulled it off. And I think this game totally does. And moving into the future, moving into 2017 and looking at Breath of the Wild and sort of how they want it to feel natural, you know, the transition from dungeon into like the locations of Hyrule, I do really think they should take some notes, strangely enough, I never thought I'd be saying this, from Final Fantasy 15. I really think like they do dungeons in real world environments correctly.
Yeah, no, I agree so much, and it really, you know, there are quite a few things wrong with FF15 that in my opinion, but at the same time, I feel like it's so important that the internet anti-hype machine doesn't just hand wave away this game, because 15, for as weird and experimental and uneven as it can be, it really does have these moments, and not even just moments, like stretches of brilliance, like with these dungeons as we're talking about. These are elements of a game that deserve to be played, and I'm afraid that a lot of people are just going to be like, oh, well, the story was uneven, oh, it was rushed, oh, whatever, the game sucks. You know how the internet can be.
Yeah.
So as far as dungeons are concerned, I like the one which you explore with Arneria.
Oh yeah, I love that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That one is really good.
That one
where you're underwater and you're looking up at the fish that are swimming.
That one, and I really like the Merlewood. I think it's called the Merlewood. It's a little short. It's where you find one of the royal tombs. But even though it's short, it was raining. It was like dark in there. I think it was like a cloudy day when I explored, and so I just got the sense that I was really exploring this really cozy forest, rainforest jungle type area with all these, of course, terrifying monsters trying to kill me at every turn. But other than that, I'm like, they're so beautiful to explore these places.
Yeah, one that really sticks out to me, too, is the swamp. Well, I guess we are getting into spoiler territory, by the way. I know you gave the warning at the beginning, but this is like a massive spoiler. So just like, warning before I say this. The first dungeon you get to, the swamp area, after Ignis goes blind.
Right.
That dungeon was when I realized that this game really was something special, because, you just had that huge story moment. You just lost Lunafreya. Ignis is like, who's sort of been the one person that they've set up throughout the whole story, like that he knows everything, right? They even mentioned like in the car one time that like, why does Ignis wear his glasses even though his eyesight's not that
right?
Well, it's because he likes to see absolutely everything.
That was a great moment.
When you had that story beat where like he is blind and you have to sort of like slow down to help him walk through the dungeon, and then meanwhile you fight this boss that's like seemingly unbeatable, and then Ignis is the one that figures out to like throw the fire in its mouth. Oh, like such a great moment, and the layout of that
powerful.
where you just have the giant, like the robotic whatever it was, like the crane in the middle, and you sort of like traverse around it through the swamp to try to find like where the generator is to turn it on, I thought was brilliant.
It's funny that dungeon, I had kind of like I kind of fooled the game, because I had, of course, been way over leveled. I spent so much time in the first half of the game that I was really over leveled going into the second half. So I think when I did that dungeon, I was around level 55 or 54 or something. Right. So I was way too strong. And so I was actually having this problem where the game would somewhat glitch out because I couldn't keep the Malboro alive long enough to trigger the, Ignis coming up with that idea. Because it would just, all my characters would keep beating on him, and it would lose its sliver of HP really quickly. So eventually I think the game figured out what was happening, and it was able to let me trigger that event anyway. But yeah, I had a little trouble because I was way too strong going into that dungeon. But I completely agree. That was one of the best moments for me in the game, when Ignis comes up with that. And, not only did he just go blind, but this is at the tail end of a stretch of time where your characters are fighting. Like, this is really the first time they're not getting along. There's a lot of angst, and the band. They're completely silent throughout the whole dungeon, unless like Gladio snaps at Noct or something. But you're kind of feeling the pressure along with them.
Well, yeah, Gladio snaps also every time you just let Ignis fall behind.
I know. He's like, yo.
Yeah.
There was like, I guess we're not sticking together with our friends today, or something like that.
Yeah,
he
and
makes
the more,
you feel
the more
really
it
guilty.
happens too, he makes you feel really bad because there's like the first time he says it, he's like, "Oh, I guess we're not sticking together today," or like, "Come on, slow down." And
Yeah.
he'll say something similar to that. But then by the end of the dungeon, if you just keep rushing ahead, he's just like, "I remember when we were once a team."
Yeah, he's like, try thinking of others.
And it's like, oh, try thinking of
and
others for a change.
Noctis is just like, shut up.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of speaks to what he was going through at the time, and I guess this is going more into story territory. But what I would say about that is that I think they nailed the road trip vibe, and I love Noctis and his group. I think they worked. I think they're the beating heart of the story, and I think they're why the story ultimately does work despite its problems. But man, they nailed that road trip vibe, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway from that entire story, especially the first half. It feels like the dynamic really changes when Lunafreya dies, and that setup in that city is just fantastic against the gigantic serpent and everything. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that completely blew me away. Like, I'm going to ask you guys while we're on the topic, like, did you expect Luna to die in the story?
I kind of expected midway through the chapter.
Really? Because I, like, when that happened and she gets stabbed and Ardyn goes in and, like, stabs her with that little mini trident thing, I'm thinking, like, oh, okay, she's still going to live. Like, because she's still talking afterwards.
Let me be real, Roger. I didn't expect her to die the way she did.
Yeah.
I did expect her to go away at some point.
I think for me, it was just more disbelief. Like, I didn't think she was going to die like that either. And then when she did, I kept thinking, this can't be it for her character. Like, Square usually does so much better with their female characters. Like, that can't be it for Luna. So she's going to come back or something. There's going to be some MacGuffin. Nope, she's actually dead, and that's really all she did in the game and this whole FF15 story. So I was surprised, yes, but more I was surprised just by how much of a total failure of a character I thought she was. And she's one of the problems I have with the game's story, and we'll get to that later. But no, to answer your question, I didn't expect it.
Yeah, because that moment, I remember, like, where you have the cutscene where then, the world thinks that she drowned in the aftermath of the Leviathan thing, right? But, like, you have seen what happens. You know that Ardyn's the one behind it, and it's just like, poor Luna. It's all I could think of. Like, one, as a character, she is a total failure of a character. But two, like, I thought for sure there would at least be some type of side quest in Altissia where, like, you go on a date with Luna, kind of like what you did with Iris.
Yeah.
Or Iris, however they say her name. But, like, I assumed there'd be something like that where, like, you go look at the dress and then there was going to be, like, sort of like a date side quest or something, and then you get to know her at least as a character before she goes away. But the fact that, like, her one encounter with Noctis after 12 years was the moment of her death just really hit home for me.
Well, it's interesting. It hit home for you. For me, it actually made it harder to relate to their story. Like, I know, and this is coming from somebody, like, 10 is my favorite Final Fantasy, and part of the reason of that is Tidus and Yuna. I love that couple. I think they really earn their ending. They earn their moments together. But Noctis and Luna, I feel like because you only see them that one time, or you only see them together that one time in that 12 years they haven't seen each other, we're supposed to believe that they're lovers and they're so crazy about each other, but that never really came through for me. So by the end of the game...
For me it was more annoying to see all that build-up from the road trip and then not see it paid off with Luna. That's the annoying part about Luna.
Yeah, like, I think it would have been a much better plot twist if, as you said, Roger, let's see, the party arrives in Lestallum and they arrive early enough to actually catch Luna, and Noctis and Luna have a day together. Like a sweet day, like they go out on a date, look at the wedding dress. Then, oh my god, if that had happened and then she died, that would have just twisted the knife right into my heart. But I think without that, it's just, you're kind of left like, wait, so these guys, okay, they really did care about each other, but we're just supposed to take that on faith.
Yeah. Oh, one thing, while we're on the topic of the wedding dress side quest. First off, completely not realistic that this group of straight dudes is like, hey, there's a Vivian Westwood dress, let's go check it out.
I love
it. And I liked it too, I thought it was funny. But two, one thing I want to bring up is I see so many people who are down on the real life, like, advertisements that are in the game, specifically the Cup Noodle quest. And I gotta be honest, I actually thought it was funny and I enjoyed the moments that happened. Like, I actually thought it was really, really funny the way Gladio straight up sounded like an advertisement during that quest, where he's like, you know what's the best type of food to eat? Cup noodles. Use the freshest ingredient. I just, for whatever reason, I thought it was really funny, and it gave the game sort of a little bit of humor that I feel like it really needed, especially at that moment in the game where all this stuff is going wrong, and you really kind of need a pick-me-up. So, yeah, I know a lot of people are down on it, and I know a lot of people just don't like those real-life ads, but to me, it's no worse than, like, Nintendo throwing in memes in their most recent games. You know, it's the same kind of thing to me.
Oh, you mean, I think instead of memes, you mean Mercedes?
Oh, yeah, Mercedes-Benz in Mario Kart. Yeah, like, if you're complaining about the cup noodles in Final Fantasy, but you don't mind the Mercedes-Benz in Mario Kart, maybe there's a bigger issue at hand.
No, Roger, I completely agree with you. I reacted the same exact way to that side quest. I thought having Gladio literally read as if he was advertising cup noodles. I'm like, this is hilarious. Like, why are people getting butthurt over this? This is great. Now, on the other end, though...
Especially the ending of that quest, too, where the Noctis is like, oh boy, I believe it, or like...
It's so good. No, it totally works as like a little vertical slice of the game that you can take for what it is and just enjoy it. And it's not like you don't have to do it. It's not like the game forces you to do this cup noodle side quest. You can completely ignore it if you want. Now, I will say, though, on the other end of that, seeing little American Express placards in some of the storefronts, that bothered me. Only because I feel like America as a term shouldn't have any meaning in EOS. This is a fantasy world. It's not I know it's based on reality, but not like America reality, right? So that kind of bugged me. But other than that, I completely agree with you.
I don't know, man. I think Donald Trump would make a pretty awesome Final Fantasy villain. I gotta be real.
I could see that.
Could you imagine, like, I just hear, like, Fighting Fate from Final Fantasy 13, and then Trump, like, lowering down from this platform and turning into Bartendel.
For me, that reminds me of... Did you guys watch that Japanese launch stream that they did?
No, a little bit of it, not the whole thing.
Where they actually have a special like version and fighting the CEO of Square Enix.
I know, I missed that. I have to go back and see it because they had this whole like special version of the game prepared for only this launch stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I got to go back and watch that. But you actually, you guys talking about Fighting Fate or talking about the music brings me to another good point, which is the soundtrack, man. The soundtrack is, this is like soundtrack of the year stuff. I mean, I've gone on forever about how Yoko Shimomura is my favorite musician of all time, and that has not changed. I'm not sure if that ever will change. Oh my god, the thing she was able to accomplish, especially with the battle themes in this game, I just can't.
I think we mentioned this on my Game of the Year discussion. I know you weren't part of that, Ash, but
right.
Me and Andre and Don, we were all sort of talking about sort of soundtracks of the year, and a lot of people brought up Paper Mario.
Yeah.
And while I love Paper Mario Color Splash's soundtrack, I love the jazz remixes and the orchestrations. I do feel like Final Fantasy 15 has to take the cake. I mean, Apocalyptus Noctis alone, I think I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
That song is just unbelievable, and every time it kicks in, when you have a summon and you hear bum 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 bum, and you see that little mini cutscene, it feels like you're actually summoning this beast onto the field.
It does.
I feel like you mentioned Final Fantasy X a little earlier, and I actually just did a replay of that game earlier this year, the Final Fantasy X like HD remaster on PS4, and I played through that. And yeah, it's like so many of those earlier missions in the game after you get the summons or whatever they're called in that game. I forgot, they call them something else.
They're called Eidolons.
There you go. Yeah. But when you actually
unlock Aeons. They're Aeons. Sorry.
Aeons. Yeah.
Oh.
When you unlock them for the first time and you're going through these like little missions in the game, you like take on like Flans or whatever.
Yeah.
And you use a summon, it just feels like you're going through this needless long cutscene that didn't need to be there. Where in this game, like there are special little ways to use the summon. Like you can't use the summon unless you're in like a dire strait. Like if one of your characters is passed out, there have to be like very specific things on the field. And then once you hear that music kick in and it's like bum bum, and you see the specks going through the air, and then the lighting changes, you're like, oh wait, stuff's about to go down right now. I could summon, one of these amazing Leviathan or Shiva or whatever, like, into the battle and then completely wipe out my opponents. It just, like, it gave a feeling of epicness to the battles that I feel like hasn't really been present in Final Fantasy games for a long time.
Right, well, and not only that, but I really did love how the summons accounted for where you were in the game. Like, one of the times I was able to summon Rama was in the Crestholm channels we were talking about, and that's deep underground in the sewers. But the summon animation actually plans for that, and it accounts for that, and I'm like, wow, like, this world really is fully realized. Like, it isn't just a location in a game. Like, they really did account for making this world feel like a living, breathing place, and I thought that was really cool. My gripe with the summons is, and I agree, they felt truly apocalyptic, and they felt, incredibly powerful. I wish the game was a little better at messaging how exactly or when exactly you will get the chance to summon them. Only because I only ever saw Rama throughout my entirety of the game. I didn't ever get to summon anyone else. Titan, Leviathan, anybody.
For the entirety of the hours that I played, I got to do 2 summons at best.
Same here.
Really?
Yeah.
So see, for me, I hit Leviathan and Shiva a lot after unlocking them.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, I think Leviathan was the one I summoned most of all. More even than Rama. I think it was almost always Leviathan. Like, if I was in a battle and something happens, I would normally summon Leviathan.
Yeah, I never saw the Leviathan summon other than when you fight Leviathan, and I never saw Shiva other than when Shiva comes to aid you against Ifrit. So I never saw those. Now it could be because I was so overleveled. And that's my bad. I was so overleveled for the game that's probably a big part of the reason why.
But for me, I wasn't overleveled.
Oh, that's true. You weren't.
I barely encountered them at all.
Well, that's something I really wish I'd seen more of, and I just want to go back and on YouTube at least and see the summon animations because they really are that impressive. And I mean, again, that just ties back into how unbelievably amazing looking this game is. And I want to give special mention to the lighting engine, or the lighting effects, whatever you want to call it. The way light filters through trees and foliage and things like that when you're driving and running around, I would often just position the camera when I was driving, try to position it so that the sun would shine through foliage, just because I was so freaking impressed by the lighting effects in this game.
Yeah. Now, did you guys have Snapshot on Prompto as one of the abilities for him? Because of the lighting, I set Snapshot as one of Prompto's abilities.
Oh, nice!
And so I especially in the sewer level, the channels, when I was battling that weird snake harpy boss thing, I would usually use Prompto to send out a snapshot, and I got 4 or 5 really good pictures due to the lighting of the sewers with the light coming down from the top, and then the weird specks for when you're doing the summon. And I think I used one of those pictures in one of the side quests near the end of the game, where you have to pick and choose, one of the photos to show somebody. So I really admired the lighting design in this game.
That's I never tried that ability, and now you kind of make me wish I had, because it didn't seem like it would be all that useful, and I felt like I was already maxing out the photos I could carry. So I didn't feel the need to spend AP on an ability that would just make me run out of photos faster. But now, hearing you talk about it, I'm like, oh, maybe I should have, because I thought the photograph element in general, I thought Prompto taking photos of the road trip was a brilliant mechanic.
And it was so good.
Yeah,
so many goofy things are getting recorded on camera.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And because of how the photos are procedurally generated, it's sometimes, it results in some unnecessarily horrifying, scary images that obviously they weren't supposed to be like that, but you get these weird eye expressions or facial expressions, and it just looks wrong, but that's part of why it's so great, too.
And I think also that makes it really hit home at the ending when Noctis asks for one photo. That was the first moment near the end of this game where I started to feel myself getting choked up. When he just asks for a photo and you know what's about to happen. He hasn't told them that he's going to die. Well, he has due to the campfire thing, but you see that afterwards.
Yeah.
But at that point in the story, you don't realize that he's told them that he's going to die, and he asks for one last photo, and and then there are little comments on all the photos at the ending where it's that's when we're all finally together. What a
I know.
Shot. Or
I spent so much time going through all the different ones just to see what different dialogue options I could trigger. It was great.
So good.
No, it's funny. You could probably find it if you go on YouTube, Roger. But there's some footage out there of somebody who chose the first photo that Prompto ever takes of Cindy as the picture that Noct chooses. So it's Luna looks at this picture of Cindy with her boobs out, and she kind of looks at Noct again, and it's really, this is your photo, and it's so good. It's terrible. It's really funny. But, this seems like actually a perfect time to switch gears and talk about the story, because, the story, this being a Final Fantasy game, is really half the experience. This isn't a Mario game where you can just say, well, it's a story, it doesn't matter. No, Final Fantasy is all about story, and after reflecting on it a few days, I think I've come to the conclusion that I like the story overall on a macro level. I think it has the shell and the heart of a good story. I just think it really lacks the moving parts and the mechanics of a good story.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so for me, there are a couple of problems with the story. I think they tried to make this an all-encompassing adventure, but forgot to add a whole bunch of details to it. And it is more important that you watch the movie than you actually think.
Mm-hmm.
So I got actually the premiere edition with the movie, so I watched the movie first before playing the game. And even then, I found myself a couple of times scratching my head. Then I have to realize I have to watch more of those anime things that they released. Or reading up a little bit more about the lore. So I always felt that somewhere I had to remember stuff from the top of my head, which wasn't explained in entirety in the game.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like the opposite problem from what Final Fantasy XIII had, where too much of it was explained in a data log or in flashback scenes, and it just felt kind of boring to find out about things that way. But on the other hand, now you have 15, where maybe it doesn't do enough world building within the game.
Yeah, and I think that's my main issue. I found that the plot elements that they presented in the game itself were really interesting and cool. But when you stop and think about it, you actually think from, well, that's weird. Why didn't they explain this much? Or why didn't they develop this character a tiny bit more? Because it seems important for what like a Final Fantasy game is trying to deliver.
Yeah.
And that part of it seems super half-baked.
Well, I think in the second part of the game, when you're on the train going straight to Gralia, I think it's almost that you can see the incision points where they cut parts out of the game and sewed it back together. I mean, like Tenebrae, like when you like that whole chapter 12 to me was so canned. I think it was called Where She Lived, because you arrive in Tenebrae literally only to see it burning, and there's this air of melancholy. Yeah, it's sad, but same with Insomnia. I didn't spend any time in Tenebrae. I didn't get to know this place or care about it. So when you arrive and it's already on fire and you're supposed to feel sad about this is Luna's home, and it's like, okay, but I barely knew Luna either, and I barely knew Tenebrae, and I barely knew Insomnia.
And the whole thing is like, I expected at that point Ravis to show up. I thought that was going to be like, and it's not. It's like their handmaiden. And she's like, oh, I watched them grow up. Okay, now it's time to go. And then you meet Biggs and Wedge, and then you leave. That's like the whole chapter.
Yeah.
I gotta say, though, I do not think Chapter 12 was the weakest point of the game. I think far and away the worst part of this game was Chapter 13, which was
interesting.
I agree.
Corridors.
I absolutely
hated that portion of the game, and I honestly
so
probably would have said this game is like perfect if not for that chapter. I would have overlooked every other issue with this game if not for that chapter, and it still is. I talked about this on my Game of the Year discussion. Final Fantasy 15 is still my Game of the Year. I still totally love it, but that chapter is just...
I kind of mentioned it on our Game of the Year discussion too, as a counterpoint of why it wasn't close to my Game of the Year.
Right.
And I still stand by that. I think Chapter 13 is the worst piece of gaming one of the first piece of gaming I played this year.
Wow, that's so interesting. Only because
thing about that chapter, though. Well, go ahead.
I'm just saying it's only interesting because I do not feel that way. I didn't love every part of it, and it has problems. I think it's way too long for one, and Noct moves way too slowly. But I actually enjoyed Chapter 13. I thought the payoff was a little disappointing, but I thought the build up to that payoff was brilliant.
Which is weird because I feel exactly the opposite.
Interesting.
I feel like the payoff was really good, but I think the lead up to it, where you're going through the corridors and you're hiding from the Magitech soldiers, was not fun. But the moment that, and this goes back to story too, the moment when you walk to the empty throne room and you see Idealis's cape, and you realize, like, oh my god, the monster that's, like, nearly unbeatable that's been chasing me this whole time is the Emperor, that's when I was like, okay, this is awesome. And then you fight Ravis, and he's like a zombie, and you get, like, all those weird little story beats from the monitor where you find out about Prompto's dad. Like, oh, that I thought was great. It was the lead up to that I did enjoy.
This is interesting, okay. Go ahead, on.
So, the problem with Chapter 13 is that I felt a complete indifference right from the start, right when you entered in, when you only have the ring at your disposal. And then it carried on for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, it did, and I guess maybe the reason the stealth elements didn't bug me was because I was spamming Holy the whole time, like I was just counter-damaging everything, so I didn't really feel the need to hide from things, but I agree, the stealth really shouldn't have even been baked into that section at all. But what's really interesting to me is that I seem to have had a completely different Chapter 13 experience from you guys, because I don't know if it was because I wasn't paying enough attention or because the game didn't message it well enough, but I didn't realize when I got to the throne room that was Eodolus's cape and that the monster chasing me the whole time was the Emperor. I barely even realized when I was fighting the Emperor that was the Emperor. Like, it wasn't until right before he died where he was saying, oh, my empire, and all I wanted was to rule the world. I'm like, oh, holy crap, this was the emperor that I was fighting. I wish I'd known that, because the moment fell flat to me. And also what you said about Prompto's dad, I didn't get any of that. So I was exploring too. I was trying to be very thorough. So
I would say that the end of chapter 13, the payoff is interesting, but I didn't realize also exactly right from the moment that it was the emperor.
Right. Well, and then when Prompto gives you his big reveal, it fell flat for me, because I'm like, wait, okay, so you're an MT, but you got to earn that. Explain to me how you're an MT. Explain to me how.
Right.
I watched the anime. I saw that you were
he's not a Magitech soldier, and I think the game, that's a translation error. I feel
is it?
I don't know what the Japanese was originally, but I feel like that was probably an error in localization, because the MTs, right? They're these lifeless test tube baby things.
Yeah.
And he obviously is from Niflheim, but his father is Verstale, the guy with the cape. Not the Emperor, not the
that guy. Oh, that's his dad?
With the cape
okay.
That's his dad, yeah. And it's
and I think
to me that's his biological father. So I don't understand. He's obviously a kid, and he went to school with Noct. You find that out in the anime, right? That he was 12 or whatever, he used to be a chubby kid. And I think that was kind of funny and kind of clever. But yeah, to me, that was such a cool moment, finding out that he's not an MT, that he is Verstale's son, and the reason he has access to all this stuff in the facility is not due to the fact that he's a test tube baby. It's due to the fact his dad is the researcher who came up with all of the Magitech infantry stuff.
Interesting. None of that was messaged to me in the game at all. Literally, I'm hearing all this from you for the first time right now, and I'm like, man,
so
I wish I'd known what I missed, because when that
Ash, so I guess that is exactly what my point is with Final Fantasy 15.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I agree. I mean, that's why I said I think it has the shell and the heart of a good story, but I think it lacks the moving parts of one. And I just feel like it doesn't always make sense how the pieces on the board are moved. And massive plot points happen off screen, like Ravis. Can we just talk about Ravis? He gets accused of high treason and executed, and he's supposed to be an important character. All of this happens off screen, and you hear about it through the radio. Now, I realize that you're supposed to be seeing the world from the eyes of Noctis and his friends. They're isolated, they're traveling. I get it.
Sure.
But I don't think it makes for very good storytelling necessarily in every instance.
No.
Yeah, I agree with that on the Ravis point. I liked the Ravis fight, and I thought it was an awesome, ending to that chapter, which I didn't really enjoy. But I did not like that he was already dead when we got there. Yeah,
and I just feel like there were so many potential character interactions and relationships that could have been explored that weren't. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
So another character interaction that I felt was ultimately a waste was Aranea.
Yeah.
Oh, she should have totally been a playable character, throughout
Completely
the course
agree.
of the game. I'm not playable. She's playable.
Because
she's playable in the dungeon. I mean, a actual main story party member. I think after that one chapter, she should have become a main party member.
But straight up, I think I would have expected at least one more encounter with her.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, no, so many individual elements of the game's story and characters feel completely half-baked, and I think that's really what suffered the most in the game's transition from Versus 13 to 15 over the last 10 years. The gameplay clearly made it through, and they came up with a system that works, and the gameplay feels confident, it feels solid, it feels like they knew what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
But the story and the characters, you can see so much cutting and snipping and tucking, and, it's just... You can tell that there was a great story here that just got absolutely shifted around and mangled in the production process.
Despite the problems with Luna Freya in that chapter, I think still being in the Water City and doing all of the stuff there still felt like the best story elements in the entirety of that game.
Yeah, I mean, Lestalin was really good. Unfortunately, I have to say, I became a victim of some really bad camera glitching during the big Leviathan fight, and even worse, during the big Ardyn fight at the end. The big final boss.
In the final fight?
Yeah, I had I was reading online about it, and a lot of other people have had the same problem. So that actually completely took me out of most of the Leviathan and Ardyn battles, because for most of the battles I was fighting the camera and not the actual enemies. So
I
now
had that happen to me at points in the Leviathan fight because I was playing it wrong. I was like warp striking a lot more than I think I was supposed to, and that came down to me of like, okay, I just wasn't playing that fight right. And then I went back and I replayed it on an earlier save just to see, because I was having the same camera issues and I didn't have them. But
I noticed it when I started using range attacks
Ardyn
more.
The final fight with Ardyn was great for me, especially like once the music kicks in and then you're flying around the city. I didn't have any camera glitches for that.
See, I did, and I think that really took me out.
I think the first time you find the Leviathan, you think you have to warp strike a lot more than you do. I heard a lot of people talking about that, but I feel that once you get a good prep of it, it's really straightforward to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I have a question for you guys, since we're still on the story. Do you think that opening, with that cold open in Insomnia, where you see the beginning of the battle against Ifrit, was that a bad idea or a good idea?
Bad idea, I think, personally.
I agree.
I feel like, because when that happens and you see that one cutscene where it like cuts up parts of Kingsglaive, I was like, I hadn't seen Kingsglaive at that point. I wanted to go in blind, and I was like, what the hell even is this? Like, what's going on? Like, okay, I knew at some point I knew his dad was going to die because it was even in the trailers. And
right.
It's like the very beginning of the game. So I was like, okay, that wasn't surprising. But then the rest of it, I was like, who are these other characters? Like, why are they fighting? What's this? Like, I didn't even realize like the crystal and the ring were a different thing. Like, I thought the ring was the crystal. And so when they get to the crystal like later on in the game and then Noctis like gets sucked up within it, I was still confused. And that's like one of the last chapters in the game. So the fact that I was still confused that the ring wasn't the crystal that late on goes to show that that was kind of a confusing opener.
That's so interesting. It sounds like all of us.
They expect you to know a lot of lore.
Yeah.
A lot of lore.
It's weird. All of us had different holes in what we understood going through the game. Like, I completely missed the Prompto stuff, but I knew about the ring and the crystal. Roger didn't know about the ring and the crystal, but totally hit the Prompto stuff. So it's interesting, but I think we can all agree that the game's story isn't messaged nearly as well as it should be within the game itself.
No. I went out of my way to know as much before going into the game as possible, and I still have plot holes.
Yeah, I know. I watched Kingsglaive and Brotherhood before playing 15, and I still had plot holes, so I totally hear you. And
I will say, though, I watched, while you're talking about that, though, because this was such a moment for me where I was like, there's no way they're actually doing him dirty like this, is when I went to watch Kingsglaive. I think it was after Chapter 13, because I realized at that moment, like, I want to watch that and figure out what happened before I get to the finale. And then when you get to the final throne room and Ardyn's there and Nyx's body is hanging from the ceiling, I'm like, really? This is when we see Nyx when he's dead hanging from the ceiling?
I don't think I realized that was Nyx.
Yeah.
Oh my god, so that's so cool. I mean, it's sad, and it's sad that they did him dirty like that, but that's cool that they had Nyx in the game even in that way, and I completely missed that.
Yeah.
Like, even a throwaway line like, oh, I recognize that guy, like he was part of, he was the leader of the Kingsglaive or something, just to let people know. I just feel like there could have been more little moments like that.
Man.
Another big plot hole, and maybe this is something you guys can explain to me. During Noctis' 10-year sleep, when he's charging the ring with the crystal's light, he wakes up in a prison, or the game calls it a prison, but, like, how did he get there? How did he get to that little shack?
Island?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Like, stuff like that.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, like, stuff like that. I just feel like there's such blatant plot holes that I feel like if there's any evidence that this game was released before it was ready, it's the story. Because, again, the story's great, but the moving parts don't all work. And it definitely, it gave me pause trying to get into some of the more emotional moments, like between... Like, let's talk about the ending, for example. Like, that moment at the end, with Luna and Noctis embracing and kissing, I was happy for him, but it didn't do a whole lot for me, like where Yuna and Tidus did in the ending of 10. However, that last campfire scene, I was crying like a baby.
Oh, me too. I was was literally bawling watching that campfire scene. The writing in that was really good. Like, and a lot of people had told me, go watch the Japanese version of it. Like, don't listen to the English dub. And I'm like, are you crazy? The English dub was fantastic. Like, kudos to everybody who was in that English dub. Because I think, like, that final line where he's like, guys, you're the best. And then you hear the music, like, it just, like, killed me.
I mean, and they all believably cry.
Yeah. The camping scene is literally one of the greatest moments this year.
It is.
But I didn't feel that the scene with Noctis and Luna was particularly earned.
Yeah. I feel like the Noctis Luna scene to me was almost kind of like a joke compared to the Campfire, because to
Right.
me it was like, this is the love story of the game, right?
Exactly.
It is Luna and Noctis. But the real love is between these brothers going on a road trip. It's not anything to do with Luna.
Yeah.
Like, Luna's whatever. Like, Luna's just who Noctis is going to be with in the afterlife. Fine.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
I think they couldn't really, like, have a happy ending for Noct and the brothers, so they kind of had to give it to Luna, because the brothers live at the ending. Like, the brothers
Right.
at the end of the game, this isn't really happy for them. Like, sure, they're living in a peaceful world, but, like, the brothers are now living in a world without Noctis, where the world is finally at peace. Ardyn and Noctis don't exist. Ignis is still blind, Prompto is still in the friend zone with Cindy, and Gladio's just chilling on his own. Like, that was the other big plot hole for me, is like, there's all this lead up with, like, Prompto saying, oh boy, isn't Cindy the best? Oh, she's the greatest. Like, I love her so much. And then it's like 10 years into the future, you get to that moment, and it's like, oh yeah, he still visits Hammerhead, and then you don't see,
Yeah.
like, Cindy 10 years later, and Prompto isn't dating her. It's like, bro, what are you doing?
Well, to be
What are
fair,
you
though,
doing?
he kind of also does that with Aranea. Like, he seems to just be kind of jumpy when it comes to women in general. He's like, oh man, Aranea's hot too, and oh man, her and Cindy,
Yeah.
man, I don't know if I could choose. And I love Ignis and Gladio. Someone says like, I'm sure they're not waiting for you to choose. Don't.
Oh
worry
yeah,
about it.
yeah, Ignis, yeah. Where Ignis is like, oh, which one are you talking about? And he's like, does it matter? And he goes, yeah, probably not. I mean, they're not waiting.
Yeah, I love all the trash talk. The trash talk felt so genuine and so real,
was
like
great.
a
Yeah.
real group of guys would do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think the Campfire scene is a really interesting illustration of how the story can be so amazingly great, right alongside it being so amazingly bad. You know what I mean? It's a weird.
It's a fluctuating story. It goes up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Even though the story's so bad, though, I gotta ask, like, in terms of Final Fantasy villain rankings, if you had to rank the villains of the franchise, I mean, I think everyone pretty much universally agrees Sephiroth is, like, the GOAT. He's the number one, like, greatest Final Fantasy
I would
villain.
actually
He's
give
up
that to
there.
Kefka, but Sephiroth.
See, I
is
hate
up there.
Kefka. Oh, I hate Kefka. And so, like, Kefka's way
I'm
below
actually
for
more
me.
of a Kefka guy too, but I get where you are coming.
You know where
I
I'm
do get
going
where you're
with
coming
this, yeah.
from.
I kind of feel like Ardyn is in the top 5 at least. I
I
think
agree.
Ardyn is actually a really good villain, and despite the story points, I feel like the smarminess and the things he does to these characters, like the way he doesn't kill Prompto or Ignis or Gladio during that sequence in 13, he just like toys with Noctis and makes him believe that they're in trouble. I don't know, Ardyn is just like a really good villain, and I think the reason I think he's a good villain is also because I can kind of understand where he's coming from.
Sure.
Once you get a little bit of his backstory, where he's like, he did nothing wrong. Ardyn did nothing wrong. He was helping people. He was scourging the world of demons. And then the family of Lucius, right, Noctis's ancestors, were like, this guy is kind of acting like Jesus. He's doing all of these, these heavenly things. We should probably do the same thing that they did to Jesus and just kill this guy. And it's like,
Right.
what are you doing, bro? Like, what are you
No.
doing? Why are you killing this
think-
guy who's creating miracles? And then it's like, so then Ardyn's like, well, you know what? Screw this. I'm trying to be a miracle worker. I'm going to get the throne back. Screw all you guys. I was trying to help.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think Ardyn is one of the parts of the story that worked, and I think he's definitely a top 5 Final Fantasy villain. And he's
yeah.
a top 5 in the same reason Sephiroth is, because he's tragic. The reason I like Kefka so much is he's not tragic. He really is just a bad, evil dude. Like,
He's
he
an
really
insane
just
dude,
wants to
yeah.
see people suffer, which I think can be its own great kind of villain. But he's not. Yeah, he's not. You can't empathize
He's
with
not
him.
a tragic villain.
Yeah,
Let
you
me
can't
put it that
empathize
way.
with him at all like you can Sephiroth and Ardyn. So I completely agree. Ardyn was one of the parts of the story that worked, and I thought his voice actor was so perfectly chosen. He absolutely nailed that role. He had a great time with it. You can tell that he was really putting his all into it. Just his laugh, like his haunting laughs when Noctis is wandering through the halls in Chapter 13, just sent goosebumps up my spine. So good.
I think that was also the best part about Chapter 13 was his voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still love how completely different our individual experiences with Chapter 13 were, which is really, I think, at the end of the day, what makes 15 such an interesting game. I think you see, because Squares is such an interesting developer, you see their AAA games, in this case 15, try things and experiment with things and attempt to do things that don't always pan out, but that you wouldn't necessarily see other AAA games even try to do. And that's what I love about this game, I think, at the end of it all.
And the other big
Sure.
thing about Chapter 13 is, for as much as me and Don are complaining about it, I also think it is integral to the story to have it the way it is. Like, I know Square just recently announced that they're going to be adding a free patch to the game that, one, like, fixes Chapter 13, and 2, opens up for a New Game Plus. So for those of us who have beaten the game, we can go back and play through the game. And I think they're probably doing the New Game Plus thing so people like us who played it the first time around will experience, like, the new, quote-unquote, Chapter 13. But I kind of feel like I don't want it to change. I feel like they did that on purpose, and they made it bad on purpose because you wanted to sort of feel this sense of isolation with Noctis. So I can't even really fault the game for 13, despite the fact that I didn't enjoy it all that much, if that makes any sense.
I think the eerie feeling of it was really represented well. I think that the whole framing of it was kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
And that's why they're likely going back to it. And they're also adding more story bits with the new update, which they are still localizing apparently.
I think one of the story bits is definitely going to be a way to clarify for people who might have missed it that Prompto's dad is Verstale, and probably another thing that sort of highlights that, like, the Emperor is the bad guy.
Well, I think we also know they're definitely adding scenes that kind of explain Ravis' story more in more detail, and kind of really illustrate to you why he chose the path he did. But to be quite honest, they have a lot that they have to add to make this story really more cohesive.
Yeah, I think the DLC will be good. I wasn't really open to, like, oh great, we're gonna have DLC episodes. Like, I kind of wanted them to just release the full game. I do actually think it's fine because I think there is a full game here. Yeah. It doesn't feel like I'm getting cheaped out of anything. It just feels like the DLC is going to be there to enhance the story for people who genuinely really enjoyed the experience and who want to know more about, like, what happens when Gladio leaves and then suddenly he comes back and he's in a spacesuit inside of this this space center. Like, what the heck is that? That came out of nowhere.
Plant, you mean the power plant?
The fire plant. Yeah.
But I'm open to a changed Chapter 13, especially given the abilities and the limited options you have through that chapter. But it's really hard to say at this point. I kind of want to see what they end up adding with that free update.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Square does not have a good track record with the number 13.
It's weird, isn't it? And it's weird because I'm one of those dirty people who actually like 13. So
I like parts of 13 too. I know, but I still feel like they can't catch a break with number 13.
They really can't. And as soon as I started reading about Chapter 13 and how people are so divisive, I'm like, there's that number 13 again. I don't know what it is with them, but so I'm glad I got you guys specifically together because Roger, you say FF15 is your game of the year. Don, you said it's not even close because of the issues you have with it. For me,
I still think it's a really, really good game.
Sure.
I mean, despite its issues, it's still a solid 40 hours and maybe even more when I get back to it.
Yeah.
Hours that I spent on the game. I don't want those hours back. I had a really good time. But despite that, I still think there are a bunch of problems with that game that should at some point be addressed.
Yeah, I think that's closer to how I feel. I think this would still be a top 3 game for me. Like I'm waffling between this game and one other for my game of the year spot. But if it's not my game of the year, I think it's easily going to be number 2. But the game it's competing with is actually another RPG, Bravely Second, which is interesting because it's almost the complete opposite. It's a very traditional JRPG and doesn't do anything all that interesting gameplay wise, but the story is absolutely phenomenal. So it's interesting, kind of trying to compare the two. But
which is weird for me because my second game of the year would be Pokemon Sun and Moon, and that's also an RPG, and it's also very different. So.
Yeah, it's been a great year for RPGs. I think we can definitely agree on that.
2016 might have been a bad year in general, but man, it has been the year of the RPG.
You guys are very aware that my number 1 is Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
Yes,
RPG.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, then this was definitely the right crew to get together to talk about this game.
Yeah.
But, I will be honest. If you're asking, would this game be in your top 10 for Game of the Year? I definitely think it wouldn't be in my top 5. I think there are better choices for me to be had there, but I could consider it a 9 or 10th spot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually want to ask then something, because we're talking about rankings anyway, if you had to rank this among the other Final Fantasy games, where would you put it? Because I think for me, this is squarely, no pun intended, in my top 3. I think my favorite game before this, I will clarify, was 12. I know a lot of people do not like 12. I think 12 is a masterpiece. I love the music in 12. I love the story in 12. I love everything about 12. 12 was previously my number 1 with 4, 6, and 7. And and then probably 13 actually in that original top 5
Interesting.
as my top 5. And now I think my top 5 has shifted, and now I actually kind of think that this game actively to me makes 12 worse. And so I would actually say that 6 is now my favorite game in the franchise. 15 is a very close second. 12 is third, and then 7, and then probably 4.
I think. I think 4 and 6 are. Like, 6 is my number 1. I think 4 is my second favorite. Now I have to make the decision if I like Final Fantasy VII more, which is likely the case.
Yeah.
I think it's gonna go on spot 4.
Man, this is so hard for me. I mean, I feel like my Final Fantasy rankings change daily almost, but
because I do like 12. I'm not a fan of 8. I'm not a fan of 10.
I recently played through 10, and when I first played it, like the day after I beat it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then now, like looking back on it, I don't think 10 is that good at all. In fact, I think I enjoyed my experience with 13 more than I did with 10.
Interesting. Okay.
I think 13 had some re-shining moments. I felt it was just way too long in the teeth for my liking.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily think it's the worst game ever, like some people think it is. But I don't think that is going to be my top 5.
And in terms of villain rankings, I mean, Ardyn is so much cooler than Seymour. Yeah. Seymour's just like a spoiled brat.
True. Ardyn is definitely among the best villains in the series. For me... go ahead, Don.
I think if I'm thinking about it very closely, I think that then Final Fantasy 15 is going to go to place 5, and 4 is going to be 12.
Okay, so I'm about to make some waves here and say that I am one of those people. I hate 12. I don't like anything about it. I haven't. I tried to play 12 3 separate times, and I had to give up about 8 hours in each time because I found it so dreadfully boring. That said, I'm going to give it another shot with the Zodiac Age, because I do think that Zodiac Age, it includes the international Zodiac job system changes that I think will, for me, make 12 a much more palatable experience.
I think that's definitely the case. I played a little bit of Zodiac Age during Gamescom. I really enjoyed it.
So I'm going to give 12 another shot, but as it stands, I would probably only rank like 2 beneath 12. Like, I really don't like 12 at all. So, not in my top 5. My top 5 probably right now is 10. My favorite's 10. Then behind that would be probably 6, 9, 7, and 13. And I also really like 13 too. That would probably be like number 6. I know that's weird.
I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting. All our top 5s include 6 and 7 at some point.
Yeah.
and me and Don's are literally exactly the same, except the spots are switched.
You know, it's funny. 7 used to not be part of my top 5. I used to really think it was hugely overrated, and I still think it somewhat is, but I went back and played it more recently via the PS4 version, and I was like, you know what? This game's actually really good. Like, it hasn't aged as badly as I thought it did, so 7's definitely in my top 5. Like, I don't think
7 is going to look so good in this engine. Like, that's another thing I thought while I was playing this game is I was like, they made this engine for Final Fantasy 15. I know they're using a lot of it for 7. It's like 7 remastered in this world is going to look just unbelievable. I feel that game is going to get even better with this remake.
Oh, I hear you. As for where I would place 15, I'm having... Oh, man, it's so hard for me to not think of 15 as being in a vacuum, since it hasn't been out for that long relative to how long it's been in development. So it's so hard for me to compare them, but I would say it probably would make maybe toward the bottom end of my top 5. Like, it might push out like 13 or maybe, but there are parts of 13 that I like more than 15. So it's hard. Like, but I feel like it would hover around the top 5 spot, like toward the bottom end of the top 5 is probably where I'm thinking it would go now. But again, you could ask me next week, and I might think, hey, it's the top 3 Final Fantasy for me. So, I don't know. I don't think it's going to supplant 10, though. Like, I did recently replay 10, and I still really love it. So
have you done the platformer dungeon yet in 15?
I have not. I've only done a little post-game stuff, because I've not really had enough time, but I'm going to go back, and I've heard a lot of things about this dungeon.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you get to the platforming dungeon, I have a feeling it's going to bump up to your top 3.
Okay, well, it's interesting, because I've been reading about this, and they're saying, Final Fantasy can do survival horror if it wants. Chapter 13 is great, but it can't be a platformer. It's terrible. This dungeon is the worst thing in the world, but you seem to like it.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's one of the coolest
I
extra
played it too.
side
It's
dungeons.
It's super cool.
Oh, I'm excited. I got to go play it tonight. I have to find time to play it tonight because I want to see what you guys are talking about. And I love platformers, obviously. So I'm curious to see how I'll feel about this.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, I think we've pretty much nailed every major point. Anything you guys want to talk about still about 15?
Well, we have to rank waifus, of course. We can't,
man.
talk about Final Fantasy 15 and say who our favorite waifu is. We have to talk about
man.
Because I think,
all right.
Okay, the choices
I
are Cindy,
accept that, but only on one condition, Roger,
Okay.
that we also rank boys.
Okay,
I'm
easy.
cool with that.
I'm down, 100%
Let's
down
do
with
it.
that. I'm cool. Let's do it. So, all right. So, for the girls, we have Aranea, we have Iris or Iris, whatever. I can tell you right now, she's not my favorite just because I can't pronounce her name correctly. It should be Iris. I don't know why they call her Iris. It's weird. We have Cindy, and then we have Luna. And then, and then I guess Shiva, too. So the five of them.
Again, Tiana.
Whatever her name is. Yeah, I'm calling her Shiva. Because
all right.
I'm going to call her Shiva. It's easier. So, so I'd say, I think I'm in the minority here. I actually like Cindy the best. Because RNA is cool, and I think RNA is probably second. And I don't really like Luna that much, to be honest. But I think Cindy is the best because even though she sends you out on all these little missions to get parts, I feel like she is the most motherly of the group. Like, I feel like she's sort of the one who's, like, watching over all of them. And, like, if there's an upgrade to the car or there's something that some way that she feels like she could help in any possible way, she will do whatever it takes. And also, I think she's the cutest. So I'm going to go with Cindy.
All right.
Okay. RNA is my favorite, followed by Cindy.
Okay, I'm stuck between Cindy and Iris, or Iris, excuse me.
Okay.
I agree with everything you said about Roger about Cindy, and I think it's important to note that I do really like Cindy's portrayal in the game. I think her outfit is really unfortunate, and I think that really,
yeah.
I think that her outfit really kind of precludes a lot of people discussing her actual virtues as a character. But if you look past her outfit, I like the way she's portrayed. She's not working for Sid. The garage is hers. She runs the garage. Even Sid says, "Hey, you need mechanic work done. Cindy's your girl. I'm just chilling here." So, I do like how she's portrayed beyond her costume. So I might have to go with Cindy, although I do like Iris as well. I would have really liked to see both of them 10 years in the future.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we might get in some of the additional content that comes out in the future. Because I feel like, I read somewhere in some like director's interview or something that there was supposed to be a part of that chapter in the future where you go to Dark Lestalem.
Right, I read that too.
Because that would have probably been where you see Iris. Would be if you go back to Lestalem. So I don't know. I think they might add that in the future. We'll have to wait and see.
All right. Well, now we have to name our favorite Husbandos.
Oh, easy.
Or our favorite boys.
Easy Ignis. Easy. No.
Okay.
Ignis by far. Dude, he watches over the entire group. He cooks. He's such a cool dude, and like I genuinely felt for Ignis when he goes blind. That was like one of the first moments where I genuinely like felt anything for any of the characters in this. Before I thought they were a bunch of like Hot Topic models. There was nothing interesting about them to me at all. And as soon as that moment happened, I'm like, wow, I actually do really feel for these characters. So Ignis has got to be the same. One,
I feel exactly the same about Ignis.
Yeah,
exactly the same.
I think I agree. It's between Ignis and Prompto for me. Because I feel like Prompto really shares some of those, really intimate bro moments with Noctis. I feel like they're close in a way that he and Ignis and he and Gladio aren't necessarily, because they are just school buddies.
I can see that.
And I also really like the fact that that Prompto has issues. He doesn't really feel like he belongs because he's a commoner. Noctis and Ignis and Gladio, they're all royalty, or they're at least connected to royalty. Noctis is, and Gladio and Ignis are connected to the royal family. He's just a guy, and you get that. And I wish it wasn't an optional scene, but you get that one scene at the motel. If you stay at a motel toward the beginning of the game, where Prompto basically tells Noct, "Hey, am I pulling my weight? Am I doing well enough? Because I don't feel like I belong here." And I just thought it was a really powerful scene. And I used to be overweight as a kid, so I really, when I watched the anime, I really empathized with Prompto and his weight problems. So I like Prompto a lot, but I can't disagree with what you guys are saying about Ignis either. So it's between Ignis and Prompto for me, but I might have to give it to Prompto, but it's so hard. It's so close.
Ignis is such a caring individual.
He is.
I really like him.
It's interesting that none of us mentioned Gladio. Because I like Gladio. I mean, he's a great character, but But I think he picks on you too much, man. It's like, come on,
Yeah.
don't lay it all on me, man. I'm doing my best. I'm a prince who just lost his girlfriend and lost his father. Like, give me a break, please.
Well, I like that Gladio. I think the reason we didn't mention Gladio is like the bad parent, and Ignis is the good parent. It's like, Gladio has to play the role of the bad, like, I'm going to admonish you, I'm going to punish you parent. Whereas Ignis is just like, okay, you want this? I'll make it happen. Sure, let's do this. It's up to Noct, you know? So I feel like most people are always going to go for the fun parent before the not fun parent.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good way to describe the relationship of the four brothers. Yeah, it's that, like, Noctis is obviously, like, the favorite child. You've got Prompto, who's, like, the best friend, or, like, the second child or whatever. Then you've got Ignis is the mom, and Gladio is the dad. Like, that's totally the dynamic of the four of them, man.
It totally is. And actually, another thing, a buddy of mine told me, if you compare Noct and his group to the Ninja Turtles, their personalities totally match up too.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
It's so good.
And then I'd say Core is the weird uncle that you only see like one every 5 Thanksgivings.
Right. Well, then what does that make Aranea?
Aranea's, I don't know. Your friend's hot mom? I don't know. Like, who would Aranea be?
Man, well, I think that's probably the point at which it's a good idea to call it a day. unless you guys have any other major points you want to hit.
I think that's about it.
Yeah, that covers it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, since we're about done here, Don and Roger, where on the internet can our listeners find both of you and your content?
Roger, go first.
Okay, you can find me at RogersBase on YouTube. I do anime reviews and gaming reviews, and I usually cover Nintendo and One Piece. Those are my two big things, but I've been talking a lot about Final Fantasy recently, so I might have to do some cool stuff with that. And I'm actually looking into doing a cooking series on my channel next year, so who knows, maybe cooking with Roger. Maybe I'm going to try out making some of these recipes in real life. Who knows? Check it out. Go
taste
subscribe
test
to me.
for you.
And then, yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Twitch as well, RogersBase.
All right, Don?
You can find me on Twitter, which is at Nintendaan, and it's NANTNDAAN. Find me on YouTube, that's the same, but at one at the end. Go Nintendo, Nintendo Force, Nintendo World Report. Whole bunch of other places. Sometimes I pop up here even on Game Explain. Andre still hasn't uploaded the stuff I recorded for him for Metopia, so get on that, Andre.
Damn it, Andre. All right. Well, as always, thank you everyone for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and consider following us on social media. You can find all the links you need in the video description below. Otherwise, keep it on Game Explain for more on Final Fantasy and all things gaming. Later, everyone.